But if you don't know, I've been on a very huge binge of reading Lord of the Rings books. And this now makes, what, three that I've kind of blasted through? Uh, Forgot to turn the audio down. But yeah, this is now makes three books, I think, back to back I've read all in a row. I started off with The Hobbit, then jumped straight into Fellowship of the Ring. Now I just read The Two Towers, and of course we'll be making our way to Return of the King probably sometime after, maybe tonight or tomorrow. I'll probably jump straight into that. I would say it's my thoughts on The Two Towers is this is not. I should say, if you guys don't know, The Two Towers, in terms of the movies, the Peter Jackson movies, I would actually say it's my favorite out of the movies. I know a lot of people tend to like Fellowship or Return of the King more. I personally, I think The Two Towers is my favorite of the movies. It's crazy how opposite I think I might be in terms of this book. I actually think so far that this might be... I think this is probably my least favorite of the books that I've read so far. I definitely think I liked Fellowship and Hobbit more than this one. I think what it is that this book is very, very... it's very uneven, I would definitely say, versus the movie. I think the movie is like super exciting. But you know what? Let's tackle it chapter by chapter. Not chapter by chapter, but I kind of have a little list here of things that I really wanted to touch on. So starting from the very beginning, let's just touch on like the differences and what there is between the book and the movie. One of the biggest things, I think I even mentioned it during my Fellowship telling, is that Boromir does not die at the end of Fellowship. Oh, okay, yes, I'm right. So he doesn't die, or he's not found to be dead at the end of Fellowship. He's found to be dead here at the beginning of The Two Towers. So they're all immediately, once this movie or book, or once this book begins, there's immediately a contrast to what happens in the movies. And honestly, I will say, I don't really feel like there was a lot different. Like unlike Fellowship the book versus the movie, there's a ton of different things. I actually think this book and movie are like pretty close to the hip, in terms of what they got going on and what was happening. Yeah, early on though, that's one of the early differences, is the whole thing with Boromir. That's slightly different. Not a heck of a whole lot. And it didn't really matter, I guess. I definitely think, I think I mentioned it in my previous talk, but I think Peter Jackson did good by leaving that in. Or adding that to the Fellowship. It definitely made that ending had a little bit more excitement kind of happening there. One of the major huge differences that I will say, that I think what really kind of makes or breaks the second book is the whole battle at Helm's Deep. If you don't remember, in the Battle of Helm's Deep in the movie, it is like a big meaty, I feel like it's a big meaty part of that second movie. And versus the second movie, actually here in the book, it's only one chapter, if you can believe that, the Helm's Deep part. The whole thing with Helm's Deep, it wraps up so quickly in the book. Versus the movie, it's like the most exciting part of the movie. And then once you get to the book, there's barely like any differences. I think one of the only differences is that the writers of Rohan, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name, Éomer. There you go. If you don't remember Éomer in the movie, but yeah, essentially Éomer is just banished. If you don't remember, he's banished by Wormtongue and Theoden. And instead of it being Éomer that Gandalf ends up going and getting and bringing to Helm's Deep to help save everybody, as it turns out, it ends up being like a totally different character. It ends up being, I think, is it Erkenbrand? I think. Oh, I don't know why I remember that name. I think it ends up being someone named Erkenbrand, who ends up being another king at some nearby kingdom that is also battling with the orcs during this time. And yeah, during the entire battle, it kind of wraps up within one chapter. It's even a fairly short chapter. I think it's only like 10 to 15 pages long. So it is not a terribly long section of the book. And yeah, as it turns out, remember when Gandalf is like, turn to the sun, to the sunrise on the umpteenth day or whatever, and look for me or something. And instead of it being him with the writers of Rohan and Éomer, instead it ends up being Erkenbrand in this other kingdom or something that's nearby. And again, not like a huge difference. I mean, as it turns out, though, throughout the the battle at Helm's Deep. Éomer's actually been there and battling with the king and stuff. But yeah, everything's basically there. That wasn't necessarily a huge difference that I, for one, thought was like super meaningful or anything of the sort. But yeah, another thing that they definitely brought over was there's a lot more conflict, I would say, or not conflict. There's a lot more dialogue with the hobbits, Merry and Pippin, when they're with the orcs and they're being carried away, and Aragorn and all of them are out searching for them. There's a lot more context with what's happening. I did notice with the hobbits and the orcs, and what I mean by that is that I feel like in the movies the orcs are kind of played up to be kind of I don't know, they're kind of played up more cartoony in terms of how evil and dirty they are. And then I feel like in the books, maybe it's because maybe Peter did this for a reason, is to make them seem more evil or something, you know, to heighten the tension. But in the books, I feel like they're a little bit more communicative, the orcs, in terms of what they're doing. There's a lot more dialogue between some of them. I remember in particular when they're carrying the hobbits off, there's these orcs that are like intricately like talking about what they could do with the hobbits and what Saruman is wanting from them. There's some of them that are like straight up like, I don't want to take it to Saruman, screw that guy. And I don't know, there's a lot more going on there. I feel like that's one thing, you know, the books really do better is, you know, no surprise, but there's so much more context, there's so much more dialogue with, and people's goals are way more fleshed out here than I would definitely say in the movies. Granted, again, J.R.R. had like 400 pages to work with versus Peter, who may have had 2-3 hours worth of film reel. That was something really cool. There's, again, that whole section with the hobbits, and as they're being carried away and as they're searching for them, there's a ton more kind of going on there, which I appreciated. But I feel like when it comes to the Ents, there's a lot more with the Ents here. I actually really appreciate it as well. Instead of like, I think one thing I kind of liked, well, there was kind of a scene that I guess is technically missing from the book versus the movie, which is really cool, is the whole scene with Treebeard and like the whole council, I guess, kind of the Ents have amongst themselves. They kind of come to their own conclusion that they're going to go to war with Saruman, and they're like, screw Saruman. Versus there is that really cool scene in the movie where oh no, it's Pippin. Pippin does it, where Pippin tells the Ent to go to this direction, and it just happens to be the direction where Isengard is. And like that whole scene happens where Treebeard stumbles upon Isengard, and he's like, oh, a wizard should know better. And all of that dialogue is still in I think all the dialogue is still in the book, but there's just not that excitement of Treebeard calling all the Ents immediately forth to battle, just from seeing how much of the deforestation that Isengard and Saruman have done. Again, a way cooler scene, but it's smart. It makes the characters, I guess, smarter in the books, because they actually have some mind of their own, where they're actually like coming up with what they want to do versus kind of just acting on reaction, I should say. Oh, and I should also say, yes, everything that happened with Theoden back at his kingdom in Rohan. There's so, man, okay, now that I'm being my notes are reminding me, there's so much cool stuff that happens here with this scene that is left out from the movie. They're like, when they first get to Rohan and they're going up, I don't remember the name of Rohan's the region, the kingdom, I can't remember the kingdom's name, where Theoden, his hall is. It's like the golden something, but this whole scene, it's less exciting, but it's more cool. There's a lot more dialogue that happens here. What I would say is really cool is that as they're entering the hall or whatever, I remember in the movies they're told to release all of their weapons, and Gandalf's like, oh, you wouldn't pot an old man from his walking stick, and then of course he lets him in and all that. But like in the book, that scene's so much cooler because there's like an entire dialogue section between Aragorn and the guards when it comes to giving up his weapons, and Aragorn is like, I love it, he's like feverishly, adamantly telling them, I'm not giving up this weapon. This is the weapon that you know, ended Sauron, the Anduril. This is the king's sword, you know, the king of king's sword. And like he goes through this whole thing where he's like threatening to kill the guards. He's like, you will not take this from me. And it's so cool how he's like, just how much he's defending, not giving up that weapon, where versus in the movie he's just like, yeah, here's my sword or whatever. And that's way cooler than that. As it turns out, he ends up like coming to an agreement to giving them, and they protect it with their lives because they know about it's being the king's sword or whatever, the sword of Elendil or whatever. That's way cooler in the books. And then once they get in there and they start dealing with Theoden, who's actually, taken over by Saruman, it's definitely less exciting than in the movie, because in the movie you have a Saruman who's actually using Theoden, and he's like does the jump at him and whatever, and he gets flung back by Gandalf with his staff. None of that's really here. It's kind of open in a second that Gandalf removes Saruman from Theoden. Again, way more exciting in the movie. That's one thing I will say about versus this movie versus the last one that I noticed more, is I definitely think this is the book, or this is the movie that probably needed a lot of the more exciting touches from Peter Jackson. I think there's a lot of stuff I feel like that was good, was proper to kind of make it a little bit more exciting. Basically the whole Palantir thing, that's pretty close to what was going on in the books. Okay, yeah. There's a subtle differences here with chapter 10, the voices of Saruman, or voice of Saruman. I think what was mainly different here is this is our heroes as they're approaching Isengard, how they're dealing with the Saruman. In the movie, it's kind of it's over pretty quickly, where they do their conversation and I guess kind of negotiating with Saruman from the outside of Isengard, the tower. Versus in the book, I think a couple of them just go into the tower and do their conversation with him instead of that. And it's a lot more interesting. You can actually see like in some ways, Saruman is like almost tempting them a little bit with some of his, because remember I think his voice is like his biggest power from what I understand from what Gandalf says. And yeah, there's a little bit of setup there about Saruman perhaps trying to trick some of them. I think he mainly tries to go after Theoden, if I recall, maybe possibly because he already has had Theoden within his grasp recently. Maybe he thinks Theoden is an easier target than the rest of them. But that's there. It's a subtle difference, but it's mainly cool just because I feel like Saruman gives up a little bit more on like what's in his future, what he's been doing, what he wants to do with these guys, and I don't know. It's definitely a little bit more interesting, I would definitely say. This is where we start getting into, in my opinion, this book is very kind of up and down. I would definitely say. I would say the first maybe third of the book is super exciting, and then there's like a whole section, and I would say that whole section, not the whole section, but I would say the beginning has got a lot going on, middle is a little bit and then once you get to the third section, it kind of ramps up a little bit. I would definitely say here we're starting to get into some of the more dull stuff, and I'll be quick on this. I would say mainly a lot of the stuff at the beginning, when you kind of see from the vantage point of when we're joined by Frodo and Sam, and then this is mainly where Gollum comes into play. A lot of this, I would say, is very closely tied to the movie or to the book. The movie and the book are very, hand in hand. I would say there wasn't a lot of differences that I can remember or recall. Again, there's a little bit more context with the marshes and everything. I think Gollum's a little bit more communicative with what's happening in the marshes and what the things are. So there's that. But yeah, I would say everything here is it's a little boring. I would say it's very dull. I would say this is probably the low point of the book. And it's like this for a while, I would say. But luckily, I will say, I'll wrap up my thoughts here soon. I feel like I've been going on. I do feel like everything here plays it closely to the book until you start getting to where Faramir, when Faramir comes into play. I almost skipped right over the Faramir part. Everything, this is still like the low point, I would definitely say. But once Faramir comes into play, when he captures the two of them, and turns out to be the three of them. This is probably, I would say, the biggest differences between the book and the movie. I would definitely say Faramir here everything is just everything flows so much better in the book than it does in the movie, I would say. Granted, I would say a little less exciting, as is the kind of thematically what's going on between the movie and the book. The movie is definitely more exciting with how it does some of this stuff. Minas Morgul, Morgul. Well, how it's so much different here is that everything's resolved like that versus how it is in the movie. Essentially, they end up kind of just telling in this cave. If you recall, there's a cave where they're all like chilling in. This whole thing, they kind of just tell Faramir that they have the ring, versus like him finding out through Gollum. But they kind of just tell him that they let Faramir in on everything. Faramir lets them in that Boromir has been found dead. And all of the dialogue just flows so much better here, I would definitely say. I don't know, it works a lot better. Even the scene where they go down and Faramir is threatening that he's going to kill Gollum from stealing from their precious fountain or whatever, and taking the royal fish or whatever it is. Yeah, everything there is it's all again, everything's just wrapped up so much better. I would say one thing that definitely comes off as better is, if you remember from the movie, the way Frodo goes about calling Gollum over, it almost does kind of feel as though he's like tricking Gollum in a way. And granted, that whole part of in the movie is there so that Gollum does have a reason to, be kind of a jerk to Frodo. Versus in the book, I remember telling somebody that, like, in the book, Frodo, when he goes up to him and he's like, Gollum, come, Smeagol, come. He doesn't say why. He doesn't tell Gollum anything. He's just like, come to master, come to good Smeagol. Versus in the book, he's like literally telling him, he's like, Smeagol, come to me. You're going to die. There's people above us. They have arrows, and I feel like it's done much better there versus in the movie. And the movie definitely makes you feel as though Frodo like does kind of betray him a little bit. Here in the book, there's no reason Gollum should be mad at him, because he's telling him, he's like, dude, you've got the ancient fish. He literally says stuff like that. He's like, you've taken fish from here that you're not supposed to. There's people with arrows. They're going to kill you unless they've told me to lead you away or something. And it's done loads better there. And then even once they talk to Gollum up top, like, one of the big things is that in the movie, they end up going to, I can't remember, but remember when they go to that scene, that whole section is eliminated from the book. None of the stuff that happens there is in the book. The whole battle that happens there, Faramir, or at least maybe it happens in the next movie, but the whole battle there hasn't happened. Faramir hasn't died yet, or thought to be dead yet. But yeah, Faramir just like, because they end up like, through getting to know him and telling him things and telling them what their goals are, he ends up like trusting them and letting them go free at that town, at that destroyed city. Instead, all of that kind of happens in the cave. Faramir lets them three go in the cave, and he does his typical, like from the movie, where he's like, he knows where Gollum is trying to take them, and he doesn't know exactly, but he knows that where he's taking them is not a safe place, and he just tells them to be wary of Gollum, and all that good stuff is all there, and it's still pretty cool. I still really like it. It's just, everything is just flushed out so much better in the book. Here, it feels like everyone, again, I've said it many times, but the whole idea of context, people's goals and what they're doing, they actually like tell better in the books versus the movies. It definitely works out in many ways. And then I would just say, once we start getting to Siddath Ungol, or what is it, the steps or whatever that lead up into Shelob's lair, everything from Siddath Ungol on, once they start getting to Sauron's domain, it gets so much better, I would say, in the book. It's kind of disappointing because, again, everything, I think the chapter is called Siddath Ungol, isn't it? Let me look at my notes. What would be the third to last chapter? That would be Shelob's Lair, Siddath Ungol. Yeah. Or Journey to the Crossroads. I would definitely say from chapter 8 on, that's the Stairs of Siddath Ungol. Everything from there on is like so much better. It's so much more entertaining. Everything that has to deal with Shelob's Lair is cool. I actually think it's more, things definitely are different in the book versus the movie. Sam doesn't just, the whole thing with Sam turning his back, or the whole thing with Frodo turning his back on Sam after the whole Gollum dropping the lambus bread and everything. That whole thing is eliminated from here. Instead, Sam is just with Frodo throughout the entire thing, all the way through the cave of Shelob. Yeah, Sam's just by the side, and they both deal with whatever's there. You know, it's definitely different than the movie. But yeah, everything here is like so cool. Dealing with Shelob, I actually appreciated it a little bit more in the book. Granted, the movie is visual, but in the book, you don't know it's a spider until like for so long while they're doing battle with it outside of the lair. And I don't know, it's really cool. I really like the Shelob part and everything. It does kind of, or I should say, versus the movie where I'm just gonna jump right into the very ending. So I'm almost done with talking the book, but where things end. If you want to know where things end in the second book, it is kind of different than the movie, where when the movie ends, it ends with them. Frodo ends up not being dead from his sting from Shelob. And as it turns out, they get out of the tower, and I think they end up just continuing their way. Versus here, where it ends with Frodo still being under the poison of Shelob, and he gets taken by the orcs and put into the tower. And that's where it ends here, is Frodo has just been captured, and Sam is just, you know, he's mad at himself because he gave up on his friend. And I really like the I think the movie also did the same thing, but I really like the inner battle that Sam has throughout this entire part. I've always really liked Sam. He's definitely a favorite of mine. I've always thought Sam was a bit stronger of a character than Frodo, but that's just me. I mean, maybe that's the point, is Sam is supposed to be the strong. I mean, Frodo is strong, but Sam's meant to be the ride and die. You know what I mean? He's like the go-to man for Frodo. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and end there my little chat there for Lord of the Rings, Two Towers. Overall, again, I hate to be so kind of down on the book. I definitely think this is my least favorite of the three that I've read so far. We'll see. I mean, I still got Return of the King, but this one just starts off really good. It ends off really good, but there's just such a large, I would actually say there's a large section in the middle that I feel like is kind of not so great. A lot of the opening stuff, like, because again, I think this one is split technically between two books. Two Towers is technically two books, and the second book is all of Frodo and Sam's venture part of it. And there's a large section of that I'm just like, don't get me wrong, I love the book, but like, I'm trying to be as honest about how exciting or not exciting as some of it is. But yeah, that's it. I'll let you guys know. I'll probably be starting Return of the King in the next, if not tonight, probably tomorrow night or something. Maybe sometime during the weekend I'll start it. I'm excited. I've never read Return of the King, so this will be my wrap up of all the Tolkien books. Once I get through Return of the King, all that I have not read is the Silmarillion, which I'll try and get to that eventually at some point. Very insightful, says Skylar. I appreciate it. I feel like I did a better job talking about Stranger Things than I did. I think I did. I don't do good with. I feel like I do better when I'm kind of left to my own brain to kind of talk about things versus going through notes. I notice that whenever I have notes for myself, I don't know. I lose track of what's going on.
Well, looks like you've reached the end, haven't you, you imbeciles? On Enter ChazmaN, you'll witness gaming brilliance beyond your comprehension. ChazmaN Live brings the drama. Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 5:30 p.m. EST. Long Plays delivers full journeys, uncut and unspoiled. Join the Patreon, Discord, Instagram, and TikTok below, if you can manage it. Still not following Enter ChazmaN? Then mediocrity clearly suits you.